I'd been working private security for almost 7 years when this happened. By then, I was considered one of the senior officers in our company's regional division. I'd done enough overnight shifts, enough emergency lockdowns, enough incident reports and field training sessions that most of the newer guards came to me whenever they had questions. The job was rarely exciting. Most nights were painfully boring. Sit at a desk, stare at monitors, log every minor event, walk patrol routes, drink terrible vending machine coffee, and count the hours until sunrise. That routine was exactly why I liked it. Predictable meant safe. That changed when our company landed a federal contract in northern Pennsylvania. Nobody told us much about the site itself, just that it was a restricted administrative records facility under government oversight. That was the official description. Unofficially, everyone just called it Ravenwood. The place was bizarre from the moment I first drove out there. It sat nearly 20 miles outside the nearest town, hidden at the end of a narrow service road that cut through miles of dense forest. No houses, no gas stations, no stores, nothing. Just trees and darkness. Then suddenly, after the final bend in the road, this massive 6-story concrete structure would appear like it had been dropped from the sky. It looked less like an office building and more like some kind of military bunker. The entire property was surrounded by 12-foot steel fencing topped with razor wire. Floodlights lined the perimeter. There was only one vehicle entrance protected by reinforced barriers and a keypad gate. Even during the daytime, the place felt wrong. Too isolated, too heavily secured, too quiet. I usually worked day or evening shifts by choice. Seniority gave me flexibility, and after years of pulling graveyard duty, I'd earned the right to avoid overnights whenever possible. But about 4 months after we took over the contract, staffing problems started. The overnight weekend guards kept quitting. No notice, no explanations. They just stopped showing up. Management blamed burnout. I didn't buy it. Still, when my supervisor Darren asked if I'd cover weekend overnight shifts for extra pay while they hired replacements, I agreed. I was moving into a new apartment at the time and could use the money. That decision nearly got me killed. The first 2 weekends were uneventful, long, quiet, boring, exactly what I expected. Then came the third Saturday. I remember the date clearly, October 14th. The weather had been awful all day. By midnight, a thunderstorm had rolled in so violently that the building itself seemed to tremble every time lightning struck nearby. I was stationed alone in the surveillance room on the 6th floor. The room overlooked the rear parking lot through a narrow reinforced window fitted with metal blinds. Along the opposite wall sat 4 large monitor arrays displaying every camera feed throughout the property. There were 32 cameras in total: hallways, elevators, lobby entrances, mechanical rooms, perimeter fence lines, parking areas. Every inch of Ravenwood was supposed to be visible at all times. Around 1:45 a.m., I was fighting to stay awake. I'd already finished my patrol, filed my hourly report, and burned through half an energy drink. To pass the time, I was watching an old action movie on my phone with one earbud in. The storm outside made everything feel strangely detached from reality. Rain hammered against the glass. Wind howled through unseen gaps in the building's exterior. Thunder rolled across the forest like distant artillery. I stood up to stretch and walked over to the window. Pulling one blind aside, I looked out across the rear lot. Lightning flashed. For a split second, the world outside turned stark white. And that's when I saw it. A figure, moving fast between the tree line just beyond the rear fence. I froze. At first, I thought the lightning had distorted shadows, but then another flash illuminated the woods. The figure was gone. I stood there staring into the darkness, waiting. My pulse had quickened, though I kept telling myself it was nothing. Probably debris blowing through the trees, an animal, a trick of light. Trying to shake the unease, I left the surveillance room and walked down the hall to the break area for another drink. The trip took maybe 4 minutes. When I returned, one of the monitors was black. Camera 27. Rear parking lot west sector, the exact area visible from the window. I frowned and checked the system diagnostics. Signal lost. That camera went offline less than 2 minutes ago. I went back to the window. Even through the rain, I could just make out the unit hanging crooked from its mount, swaying violently by its cables. It hadn't fallen. It had been ripped loose. That realization sent a cold wave down my spine. Before I could react, the security console chimed. Access alert. My eyes snapped to the monitor. A secured entry point had just been opened. Rear maintenance entrance. Authorized code accepted. I stared at the screen. The log displayed a valid credential. That shouldn't have been possible. Weekend overnight access was restricted to me alone. No maintenance crews, no federal staff, no scheduled visitors, no exceptions. I grabbed the desk phone to call local dispatch. Deadline. No dial tone. I checked my cell. No signal. The storm had knocked out reception. That's when every instinct I'd developed over 7 years started screaming the same thing. Someone was inside, and they weren't supposed to be. I unholstered my sidearm. My mouth had gone completely dry. The protocol said to remain in the surveillance room, secure the floor, and wait for backup. But with the phones dead and no signal, backup wasn't coming unless I got outside. The nearest patrol unit was at least 20 minutes away. I had to move. I cracked open the surveillance room door and stepped into the dark hallway. The emergency lights still glowed faintly red overhead. The storm had dimmed the building's main power, causing everything to flicker. My plan was simple. Take the service stairwell to the lobby, exit through the front entrance, get to my truck, call for help from the highway if necessary. I moved quickly but quietly. Every footstep sounded unnaturally loud. I'd almost reached the stairwell when the entire building went black. Not flickering, not dimming, dead, complete darkness. For half a second, silence swallowed everything. Then the emergency backup lights kicked on, casting the corridor in a sickly crimson glow. The generator should have activated immediately. It didn't, which meant someone had manually disabled it. The generator room was in the basement, directly beneath the stairwell I was about to enter. I opened the heavy metal door as carefully as possible. Inside was darkness and concrete. No sound, no movement. I started down. 1 floor, 2 floors. Then, somewhere below me, a door creaked open. I stopped breathing. A second later, I heard it. Footsteps. Heavy. Measured. Ascending the stairs. Coming straight towards me. And they were moving fast. For a moment, I couldn't move. I stood frozen on the 4th floor landing, one hand gripping the cold metal railing so tightly my knuckles ached. The footsteps below were steady at first, deliberate, almost casual, like whoever was climbing those stairs already knew exactly where I was. Then they stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse. I could hear the storm outside rattling against the building. I could hear my own breathing. And then, without warning, the footsteps exploded into a sprint. They were charging up the stairwell, straight for me. Adrenaline hit me like a jolt of electricity. I spun around and bolted upward. Every instinct screamed at me to run. My boots pounded against the concrete steps as I flew back toward the 6th floor, my shoulder slamming against the railing on the turn. Behind me, the footsteps thundered louder, fast. Whoever it was gaining. The service stairwell at Ravenwood had one unusual feature. Above the 6th floor landing was a maintenance ladder bolted into the wall, leading to a roof hatch. It wasn't meant for regular access, just maintenance crews. But in that moment, it was the only advantage I had. I hit the 6th floor hard, nearly slipping as I reached the landing. Thinking fast, I yanked open the 6th floor door and let it slam shut behind me. The crash echoed through the stairwell like a gunshot. Then I immediately lunged for the ladder. The idea was simple. Make him think I'd run into the hallway. Hide above. Let him pass. I climbed as fast as I could, my boots clanging against the metal rungs. The narrow shaft above was pitch black.
I wedged myself against the wall just beneath the roof hatch, every muscle trembling as I fought to stay silent. Seconds later, the footsteps reached the landing. They stopped. I held my breath. The 6th floor door burst open, then I heard him run into the hallway. It worked for maybe 3 seconds. Then there was silence again. A horrible, terrible silence. And in that silence, I realized something. He'd figure it out. There was nowhere else to go. The stairwell ended here. If he checked behind that door and found nothing, he'd look up. I had to move. Now. I dropped from the ladder. The impact shot pain through both ankles, but I stayed upright. The second my boots hit concrete, I ran. Behind me, the hallway door slammed open again. He heard me. I tore down the stairs. 5 floors. 4. 3. The sound of his pursuit echoed above me. He was faster than before. No hesitation now. No caution. Just pure pursuit. When I hit the 2nd floor landing, I glanced back, and for the first time, I saw him clearly. He was dressed entirely in black. Heavy tactical clothing, black gloves, a dark hood pulled tight around his head, his face hidden by some kind of fitted mask. But what terrified me most wasn't what he looked like. It was how he moved. Precise. Controlled. Not like some panicked intruder improvising. This was someone trained. Someone who knew exactly how to move through confined spaces. And in his right hand was a pistol. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a burglar. This wasn't some random trespasser. I nearly stumbled. Training kicked in. Draw, engage, neutralize. That's what every certification course drilled into us. But theory and reality are two completely different things. I'd qualified on paper, passed every tactical exercise, hit every target. But now, with a real human being chasing me through a dark stairwell, I couldn't bring myself to pull the trigger. So I kept running. 1st floor, lobby level. I burst through the stairwell door and sprinted across the empty lobby. The front glass entrance was 30 feet ahead. I fumbled for my keycard with shaking hands. Behind me, the stairwell door slammed open. He was right there. I slapped the card against the reader. Red light. Denied. I flipped it over and slammed it again. Green. The lock clicked. I shoved the door open and launched myself into the storm. Rain hit me like ice water. Wind nearly knocked me sideways. My truck sat near the entrance, barely visible through the sheets of rain. I hit the remote start as I ran. The headlights flashed, doors unlocked. Behind me, the front doors of Ravenwood exploded open. He came out at full speed, no hesitation, no attempt to hide anymore. He was sprinting straight at me. I dove into the driver's seat, slammed the door shut, and hit the ignition. The engine roared. He was maybe 15 feet away. I threw the truck into reverse, tires screeching across soaked pavement. The rear end fishtailed violently as I jerked the wheel. For one horrifying second, I thought I'd lose control. Then traction caught. I slammed into drive and floored it. The truck shot forward through the gate lane, clipping one of the reflective barriers hard enough to send plastic shards flying. In the rearview mirror, I saw him stop in the middle of the lot, just standing there, watching me leave. He didn't fire, didn't chase, just stood motionless in the rain. That image stayed burned into my mind. By the time I reached the main highway, my phone regained signal. I called 911 fast enough, I nearly dropped it. Local deputies met me at a gas station 12 minutes later. I was shaking so badly I could barely explain what had happened. 3 patrol units followed me back to Ravenwood. The building was empty. No sign of forced entry, no broken windows, no damaged locks, nothing. But in the stairwell between the 2nd and 3rd floors, they found something. A handgun. Black polymer frame, fully loaded, no serial number. The deputy who picked it up looked at me and quietly said, "This isn't amateur stuff." Forensics found partial glove fibers on the grip. Nothing else. No fingerprints, no DNA, no camera footage. The system logs from the exact time of the breach were wiped clean. Not corrupted, deleted. Like someone with administrative access had remotely scrubbed them. That raised even more questions. Questions no one ever answered. The federal agency overseeing Ravenwood conducted its own internal investigation. We never received details. A week later, our company was informed the contract was terminated immediately. No explanation, no discussion, just over. The facility was shut down within the month. I drove past it once, about 6 months later. The fence was gone, the gate was open, the building sat abandoned, dark and silent behind overgrown weeds, like no one had ever been there. I left private security not long after. People always ask if I think that man was there to kill me. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe I just happened to interrupt something. Maybe I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. Or maybe if I'd been 30 seconds slower reaching my truck, I'd know exactly why he was there. Either way, one thought still keeps me awake some nights. He got into that building using a valid access code, which means he either worked there or someone inside let him in.
There's something unsettling about office buildings after midnight. During the day, they're loud and alive. Phones ringing, printers humming, people laughing in break rooms, elevators opening and closing every few seconds. There's an energy to them that makes even the blandest corporate building feel normal. But at night, everything changes. The same fluorescent hallways feel sterile and unnatural. The silence becomes oppressive. Every creak of the walls sounds deliberate. Every shadow feels like it's watching. I learned that the hard way. Back in 2019, I was working nights as a private security officer in Hartford, Connecticut. The building I was assigned to was called Sterling Plaza, a 12-story corporate office complex downtown. It housed law firms, accounting agencies, tech startups, and a handful of businesses that honestly seemed too vague to trust. The kind of offices with frosted glass doors and names like Meridian Solutions or Apex Strategic Holdings. Nobody ever seemed to know what those companies actually did. Still, it was considered one of the easiest assignments in our company. Good pay, quiet environment, minimal incident reports. Most guards fought for that posting. I was 28 at the time and had been doing security work for almost 4 years, long enough to know the difference between a genuinely dangerous situation and your imagination running wild. Or at least I thought I did. My shift started at 11 p.m. and ended at 7 a.m. The routine never changed. Clock in, check all perimeter doors, review the camera systems, do patrol rounds every 90 minutes, log anything unusual. Most nights, unusual meant something like finding an employee's coffee mug left in a conference room. Nothing ever happened. That's what made what happened on November 7th so hard to process. It was a Thursday, cold enough that your breath hung in the air the second you stepped outside. By midnight, the building was completely empty. The cleaning crew had finished early and signed out around 11:40. The last employee had left just after that. By 12:15, it was just me. I was sitting in the security station behind the main lobby desk, half watching old reruns on my tablet while occasionally scanning the surveillance monitors. Sterling Plaza had over 40 cameras. Every floor, every hallway, every stairwell, the loading dock, the underground parking garage, the rooftop access points. Everything was visible. At around 12:47 a.m., something caught my eye on monitor 18, the underground garage. At first, I thought it was just a trick of shadow. The lighting down there wasn't great, and the concrete pillars often distorted movement if headlights from passing traffic outside hit the entrance ramp. But then it moved again. A figure, walking slowly between rows of parked cars. I sat up straighter. The garage should have been empty. All employee vehicles were gone except for 3 long-term reserved spots near the elevator bank, and whoever I was looking at wasn't heading toward any of them. He was just wandering, slowly, purposefully, moving between the pillars like he was inspecting the place. I zoomed the camera feed. The image grain sharpened enough to make out details. Male, tall, wearing what looked like a dark overcoat that hung almost to his knees. No hat, no visible bag, and something about his posture immediately bothered me. He moved stiffly, almost unnaturally.
Not limping exactly, more like his body wasn't moving in rhythm with itself. Like every step had to be consciously calculated. I radioed my supervisor, Nate. He was covering another site about 15 minutes away. "Probably a late employee," he said. "Check it out and let me know." His tone made it obvious I thought I was overreacting. I almost agreed. Almost. But something about the way the man moved made my stomach tighten. Still, protocol was protocol. I grabbed my flashlight, clipped my radio to my belt, and headed for the elevator. The ride down felt unusually long. The fluorescent lights inside the elevator buzzed softly overhead. I remember staring at my reflection in the brushed steel wall and noticing how tense my face looked. When the doors opened onto the garage level, cold air hit me immediately. The underground structure always ran colder than the rest of the building. Concrete retained the chill, and that night it felt freezing. The garage was silent. No movement, no sound. Just rows of empty parking spaces stretching into shadows. I stepped out cautiously, flashlight raised. "Security," I called. My voice echoed through the concrete chamber. No answer. I moved slowly through the first row, then the second, shining my light underneath vehicles, behind pillars, into the stairwell alcoves. Nothing. No footsteps, no breathing, no movement. The entire garage was empty. After 15 minutes of searching, I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Maybe some weird camera artifact, a delayed reflection, something. Feeling mildly embarrassed, I headed back upstairs. The moment I sat down at the security desk and looked at monitor 18 again, my blood turned to ice. He was back, standing in the exact same spot where I'd first seen him, perfectly still, facing the camera. I froze. There was no way. I just searched every inch of that garage. If he'd been there, I would have seen him. Unless he'd been watching me, hiding somewhere just outside my flashlight beam. The thought made my skin crawl. I zoomed further. The image quality distorted slightly, but I could make out more now. His coat was drenched. Water dripped from the hem onto the concrete. And his feet? My breath caught. He was barefoot, completely barefoot, pale skin against the dark garage floor. His feet looked soaked, leaving visible wet impressions behind him. Who walks barefoot through freezing concrete at nearly 1 a.m? Before I could process it, he moved, slowly turning away from the camera. Then he began walking towards the garage access stairwell. Not hurried, not nervous, just deliberate, as if he knew I was watching. I switched to the stairwell feed. Nothing. Hallway feed. Nothing. Elevator feed. Nothing. He simply vanished. That was impossible. There was no blind spot between those cameras, no dead angle, no way to move from the garage stairwell into the building without appearing somewhere on the system. Yet he was gone. I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach. Then the elevator chimed, right there in the lobby. I looked up. The door slid open. No one inside. I stared for several seconds before stepping closer. And that's when I saw them. Footprints. Wet footprints. Bare human footprints. They led from the elevator threshold across the polished marble floor of the lobby, straight towards the east corridor. I stopped breathing. The footprints were fresh. Water still glistened in the overhead light. Whoever had made them had stepped out of that elevator less than a minute ago, which meant he was somewhere on my floor, inside the building, and I hadn't seen him come up. I slowly reached for my radio. My hand was shaking. "Nate?" I whispered when he answered. "He's upstairs." Silence. Then, "What do you mean upstairs?" I stared at the trail of wet footprints disappearing into the dark corridor. And just then, from somewhere deep in the east wing, I heard it. A single slow footstep, followed by another, getting closer. For a second, I couldn't answer Nate. I just stood there, gripping the radio, staring into the east corridor as those footsteps echoed faintly through the darkness. Slow, heavy,
wet. Each step made a soft slapping sound against the polished tile, like bare skin pressing against stone.
Nolan?
Nate's voice crackled through the radio. "Talk to me."
He's inside,
I whispered.
The words barely made it out. I don't know why I kept my voice low. Maybe some irrational part of me thought if I spoke too loudly, whoever was out there would hear me. And somehow, that felt dangerous.
"Stay put," Nate said immediately. "I'm on my way." I should have listened. I should have locked myself inside the security office and waited for backup. That would have been the smart move. But there's something about working security for years that rewires your instincts. You're trained to investigate, to verify, to respond. Sitting still while an unknown intruder moved freely through the building felt impossible. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out from behind the desk. Sterling Plaza's lobby connected to 4 main office wings, each lined with glass-fronted executive suites. During the day, the hallways were bright and busy. At night, they felt like something else entirely. The motion-sensitive lights only activated in sections. Everything beyond the nearest illuminated patch remained swallowed in darkness. I followed the footprints. They were impossible to miss. Dark, wet impressions against pale marble. Perfectly human. Perfectly bare. The trail led 30 feet down the corridor before turning left toward Wing C. I moved slowly, my flashlight being cutting through the dark. Every nerve in my body was screaming. I kept expecting the prints to stop or vanish. Instead, they continued, one after another, steady, deliberate, as if whoever made them wanted me to follow. That thought hit me so suddenly I stopped walking. The silence pressed in. Then, somewhere ahead, I heard it. A faint metallic creak. A door opening. I swung the flashlight toward the sound. The beam landed on Suite C14, the law offices of Mercer and Haynes. Its frosted glass door was slowly drifting shut. I hadn't heard footsteps running. No sign of movement, just that door settling back into place. My pulse hammered in my ears. I approached cautiously. The wet footprints stopped right outside the entrance. I swallowed hard and pushed the door open. The reception area inside was empty. Rows of chairs, a dark reception desk, muted city lights filtering through the far windows. Nothing else. I swept the flashlight across the room. No movement. No sound. Then I noticed the inner hallway. The footprints resumed there, leading deeper into the suite. I radioed Nate again. No response. Static. I checked my phone. No service. That wasn't unusual in certain parts of the building. The concrete and steel often interfered with reception. Still, it made my chest tighten. I moved into the suite. The beam illuminated framed degrees, closed office doors, and polished wood paneling. Everything looked untouched. The footprints led all the way to the final office at the end of the hall. Its doors stood slightly open. I stopped a few feet away. The darkness inside was absolute. I could hear something. At first, I thought it was breathing. Slow, uneven. Then I realized it was dripping. Water. Steady droplets hitting hardwood. My mouth went dry. I pushed the door open with the flashlight. The office was empty. Large desk, leather chair, bookshelves, rain streaking down the windows, and in the center of the floor, a spreading puddle of water. The footprints ended there. No return trail, no hiding places, no adjoining exits, nothing. It was as if whoever entered simply vanished. A cold wave passed through me. Every rational part of my brain fought to explain it. Hidden panel, maintenance hatch, optical illusion,
anything. Then I heard the elevator chime, back in the lobby. I spun around. The next second came the unmistakable sound of running footsteps, fast, not toward me, away. I bolted from the suite. By the time I reached the lobby, the elevator doors were closing, and standing inside was the man. For the first time, I saw his face, or what should have been his face. His skin was pale to the point of looking almost gray. His hair hung in soaked strands around his head, and his expression? It was completely blank. No anger, no fear, no emotion at all. Just two dark, hollow eyes fixed directly at me. Then he smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It stretched too wide, too slowly, like he was learning how to imitate one. I lunged forward. The door shut. The elevator began rising. I hit the call button repeatedly, but nothing happened. The floor indicator climbed, then stopped. The 5th floor. I grabbed the master key and sprinted to the stairs. My lungs burned by the time I reached 5. The hallway was empty. No movement, no wet prints, nothing. I searched every office, every bathroom, every storage room. No sign of him. It was like chasing smoke. Then my radio crackled. "Nolan, where are you?" "Nate." I nearly collapsed with relief. "5th floor," I gasped. "There's someone in here." "I'm in the lobby," he said. And then his voice changed. Sharp, urgent. "Nolan, get down here, now." Something in his tone made my stomach drop. I ran. When I reached the lobby, Nate was standing rigidly near the security desk, staring at monitor 18. I looked, and every bit of blood drained from my body. The garage camera showed the man, standing in the exact same spot as before, motionless, facing the camera, barefoot, dripping wet, exactly where he'd first appeared. That wasn't possible. I had just seen him in the elevator, seen his face, chased him to the 5th floor. Yet here he was again, as if none of it had happened. Nate rewound the footage. We watched together. The screen showed me leaving the desk to investigate the east corridor. Then, 20 seconds later, the man appeared in the garage feed, standing perfectly still. He never moved, never entered the elevator, never left the garage. The timestamp was continuous. No glitches, no cuts, nothing. I felt physically sick. Nate immediately called building management and local police. They arrived within 20 minutes. The entire building was searched. Nothing. No intruder. No footprints. No puddles. No signs of forced entry. And when they reviewed the camera archives, every recording from the previous 2 hours was corrupted, except for monitor 18. That single feed remained intact, still showing him, standing there, watching. The police assumed some kind of system malfunction combined with exhaustion-induced paranoia. Management blamed software errors. I knew better, because before they reset the system, I zoomed in one last time, and there, reflected faintly in the polished hood of a parked car near him, was another figure, standing directly behind him, tall, still, watching him the same way he'd been watching us. I quit Sterling Plaza 3 weeks later. Nate lasted another month. The building changed security contractors after that. Officially, no explanation was ever given. But years later, I looked up Sterling Plaza out of curiosity. I found an old archived article from 1996. A maintenance worker had drowned during a basement flood caused by a burst main line. His body wasn't discovered for nearly 12 hours. The attached photo showed his employee ID. Same hollow eyes, same gaunt face, same man. I still avoid parking garages whenever I can, And every now and then, when I'm walking through empty buildings late at night, I swear I hear it. That slow, wet slap of bare footsteps somewhere just behind me, keeping pace, never getting closer, never falling behind.